Hello, everyone. My name is Lacey Barrett, and I am here with Beth Lindsey today. Beth is a birth photographer in the Hawkesbury area of New South Wales, and her business name is Natural Focus Photography.
Right now. So, all those fun things. But
Yeah.
yeah, good.
Oh, that's so good to hear. You had shared some of your images on Instagram, and it was just such a joy and beauty to kind of watch that journey. So I'm glad things are looking up for you.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I know it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah.
You watch women give birth for so long, and I was like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I can't wait. Like, I'm going to just look amazing. It's going to be the most picturesque birth. And then it was a bit of yeah, crazy. It was great, but it was, yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
No, I totally get that. I wanted to sit down and have a chat about birth photographer of the year. You have consistently entered since like day one of the inception. And it's always so amazing to see how people's work evolves over that time and where you start and kind of where you go and the creativity that unfolds from that. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your Gold Award winning image from 2023 last year and just some of the takeaways that you've kind of gathered over the years of submitting all of it. You don't have to be biased. Pros and cons. I'm open for all of it. And yeah, just let's start with the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us how that image came about.
Yeah, it was one of those situations. And I find with all, like, as I've developed more what I enter into competitions, it very much is, I, it's like, it has to just be a spur of a moment thing. Like, and most of the time, I do not even like think of the image as like a competition image until I get back and I really go through. And then I'm like, oh, that's a nice one.
Mm-hmm.
This one was slightly different in that as I was taking this photo, I was like, this is going to be amazing. And it was just a case of, it was a really amazing, like, VBAC mum. She was working bloody hard and we'd kind of been together for days and she had a private midwife. So I knew the midwife really well. And the two of us are there watching her like give birth in this mirror because she's kind of on hands and knees. And as we're watching, like, the midwife is also looking in my camera and seeing, like, she could see on the screen what I was trying to do. So she starts like cleaning the mirror between like contractions. So it's like, anything that was like falling down on there, like we had like a clean slate. It was just one of those things that we worked together and there's a series of images from it that just are amazing. And the midwife herself, she has them blown up in her appointment room
I love
at her
that.
practice. And it's like, I do think for the poor, like, dads who have never, been to a birth before, and they walk in for their first appointments and it's literally like crowning shot on the wall. It's massive.
That's
But
the best though.
yeah, so it just kind of, and like at the time we both were like, this is so cool, like this looks amazing. And but it's also one of those things, I've never been able to recreate it. It's never
Mm-hmm.
like, it just happened. And every now and again I think actually it was like a week or so ago, I saw someone on Instagram that had a similar shot. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like with the mirror underneath, like, and photographing it. And it's just one of those things that, like, as it happened,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was just super excited. And then when I edited it, and it wasn't actually even that much I had to do edit wise for it. It just kind of worked out amazingly. And I just was then waiting. That was like early 2023. So then I was just waiting for the awards. I was like, I've got to enter this.
This one, I have my entries. I have my entry.
Yeah.
So let's go through and talk about the different iterations, right? Because there's a couple of different ways that images play out. There is a series of images from a scene that we're trying to select from. And then sometimes there is an image, a specific image that we have, and we're like cropping and tilting and like color grading and doing all these crazy different iterations to a single image. Your your case was that it was a series of images from this scene. So walk us through some of the different images that you had and what you were looking for in those images that made you be like, okay, not this one.
Yeah. So, like at the start, kind of definitely, I really do love all of them because I think it just shows such a like just the progress of the pushing stage and well, the crowning stage really. And when I was kind of going through, like, this is before we were really clocked on to like keeping the mirror clean. But it was also something that I didn't want to like say to the midwife, like, can you clean this?
Right.
But I'm glad that she kind of like cottoned on and like, started doing. It's one of those things like you don't want to interrupt the birth space. But at the same time, you're like, I really know this would be amazing.
Well, once you work with midwives for so long, you kind of like dance around each other and you get to know them and how they work and they get to know you and what you're looking for, especially if they're familiar with your work. And so it's really beautiful to form those relationships and not even have to like talk. You can just kind of look and be like,
yeah. Yeah. And I'm lucky. We've got like amazing midwives in the area and they're all pretty good. So it's, worked out really well. This one, like, I love this one. It's like, this was the start of kind of like capturing the blood as it was dripping down. And that was something that I really was trying to get in the shot, was kind of that motion of, just as baby was kind of descending. But ultimately for me, looking at this one, it was just too distracting with like the thigh kind of like on the side there, the like smears of stuff on the mirror. I was just like, it's awesome. I think I even tried cropping it in to kind of see how it would look like really tight in. And it just didn't have the same effect. I think the mirror, you really have to kind of see the mirror to realize like have that effect. But yeah, it was just the kind of, and you can see as we go along, because she was obviously moving, like with the contractions, like she was kind of swaying. So sometimes she was like really like nicely positioned in the mirror, and other times she was like way off. And I've got like some video clips as well, because she like just pushed so beautifully that it was like such a controlled pushing stage that like I had time to like play around. Like, some babies, like they just, they come, which my baby did that. So there was no time to like think about anything. Whereas with this, like I could like do a contraction where I was filming it and then I could photograph the next one. And like, we just knew we had that time because it was just, lovely and controlled. But yeah, so you can kind of see in the videos as she moved, like she would kind of go out of it. So it was like making sure that it was positioned that, you could kind of see everything really nicely, but then also kind of get the whole story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what I find really interesting is, so I have six shots before you got to the final image. Let's move on to this one and then I'll ask you at the end. I think this is a good ending question.
Okay.
So what made you say, okay, not this one, or maybe, or yes, this one. And then when you went through your creative process was like, okay, maybe not this one.
Yeah, this one is the closest to the one that I actually ended up submitting. And the things that this one, like the mirror itself is not like fully in the frame. And now I say that, I'm like, is it in the other one? But just like the added things that were just slightly distracting that I was like, oh, it's awesome, but it's not kind of like the shot. So kind of the smear of the mucus there. It's like we didn't have the drop of the blood, which was something that I was just really drew me to the one that I did pick. And you can kind of see more in the mirror than just the focus of what you wanted. So you can kind of see a bit of the midwife. So it's just, again, kind of like, to me, it's just like a little distracting, a little bit messy, kind of with where the torch is hitting on her leg is like just bit too exposed. So it was kind of the like, it's close, but it's not in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this one.
Yeah, so this is the one that ended up being the submission, but slightly
Oh,
like
hold on.
left in.
That one. Oh, yeah. See,
Yeah,
you can
so
see
that's
that
kind of
difference.
what. Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
just do that a
So
couple
and
times. So this
so you
was the
can see.
final.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then really, yeah. So the difference was with her leg where the torch is hitting, and you can kind of, it's the band from the CTG that's kind of hanging down. And I was like, oh, it's a bit distracting. And so many times in the past, I've submitted images and I'm like, I love this image. It's so amazing. And someone will pick out like the tiniest little thing. And I'm like, oh, like I didn't even see that.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when it came to this one, I was like, no one is like nitpicking this.
And it really, I know it's so frustrating, especially for birth photographers, because it is pedantics, but it is those tiny, small details that make the difference between this is client work and like this is award work, because it's just those really, really small details that they really kind of all add up. Overall, there's nothing wrong with the image, but with these small micro pedantic changes, it can just add so much to the story to just clean up just those couple minor things. And so I know while it can feel like they're ripping my image apart, I can't change that. And it's like, well, no, you can't change it, but like you can crop it, or you can dodge it or burn it. And that's all we're really trying to come forth with, is the information of like, if you just did these couple of things, like that would elevate this into such a wild, crazy place. And so
Yeah.
it's so cool to see, because you're right. I'm looking at this as a judge's perspective, and I would totally be like, that's gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah. And the image that was one that like broke my heart, that was like nitpicked, it was a silver award.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was like one tiny little thing that was like on, I think it was like something was hanging off the end of the bed and it was like pulled. And I was like, I can't change that. Like, why are you? But then like having that feedback, I then went in and like when I was doing these, I was like, okay, we're making sure this doesn't happen again. But yeah, and when you do look at it, it is distracting. And so yeah, just kind of bringing that in, and so not as much of her leg is also kind of in the shot. So the focus really is just what's in the mirror.
Yeah. And I think the difference is what that makes it distracting is that it's overexposed behind it. And the thing is, the CTG cord is a little bit darker. So it brings more attention. If it was all overexposed, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the joy of a torch sitting right there.
I know. Still, wonderful job, though, not blowing that out in the mirror, though. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, again, it's like just what a great situation was that we had the time that I could really adjust everything. Like I wasn't using flash for any of these either. So it was, and then it was the fun game that I was preparing for of as soon as this baby comes out, I need to turn my flash back on and have to then change my settings super fast to then be ready to catch those moments, not focusing on the torch. So that was the fun. I always love it when I put myself in those situations.
I know.
You're just thinking like 100 things at once.
Cheat sheet moment, though. You can set a memory 1 and a memory 2 to most cameras that'll get you there quick.
I do know that.
I haven't set mine up either.
And it would make my life so much easier. And I'm
agree.
so aware of it. And it always is when I'm in a birth in that situation. I'm like, I should have had that set up. And I don't.
I'm the same.
We just make it harder for ourselves.
I know.
We got it. It's fine. You just got to work fast.
Okay, so you tried this in black and white.
I love black and white. And I think if you go back and see like the percentages of like images I've submitted that are black and white to color is like, yeah, black and white so much higher. I pretty much, and I think this is like a crazy, ridiculous way to edit galleries, but I do my full gallery and then I do the full gallery in black and white. and then I go through and like pick like from them. Takes me forever, but I love to see every image in black and white because it's just something about black and white images for birth. I love them. And yeah, so I wanted to try it. I wanted to see it. I do like how it looks, and I definitely delivered it to the client with this black and white image. But it just loses the effect. You don't have that kind of like that dramatic red drop of blood, and just you kind of lose detail in kind of like baby's head. But yeah, it was just, I always check it and see what I think of it. But yeah, definitely the color was the way to go.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the black and white fixes the color issue of the CTG strap, but it then creates other issues for you as the artist, and so then it becomes a game of, well, which is the lesser of two evils, and
Yeah.
then at what stage do you abandon the image and select a different one?
Yeah, definitely. And it's that tricky thing, like, those chords are like not aesthetically pleasing.
I know. And then they get stretched out. So they're like, you can't even make it look pretty because once they get stretched out, they're all like wrinkly and ripply. And you're like, I can't even make that look pretty.
No, not at all. It's and even like looking at this again, because it's been a while since I've looked at this image in black and white. I feel like it tells a different story. I think your focus definitely, yeah, it just goes to different places, and you're like, it like honestly could be a different birth. Like I feel like because of how differently the images feel between the color and black and white.
As just from me looking at it, it's interesting that you say that because typically the eye is most drawn to the brightest part of an image, which is why judges are always like banging on about watching your highlights if the highlights are not in the subject that you want to be looking at. But with this, the first thing I see is actually not the highlights. It's the drop of blood that's actually, it's the darkest part of the image that I'm drawn to. And I think it's because it's in the center, and it's so interesting to watch because it changes where my eyes go initially versus the color image, which is really cool because you're right. It does tell a different story because my eye is drawn to something different on the black and white image versus the color image. So during the color image, the first thing you see is the baby's head, and then you see the droplet, and then you go, oh, ring of fire, and you're like, wow, click, click, click. But here you see the droplet, then it's in reverse, and that is going to tell a different story. So you're right. It's really cool to break that down and have a look at that.
Yeah, definitely. Always put them in black and white.
Yeah, see what it looks like. And I'm like such a massive fan and advocate of like extreme editing, extreme cropping, do everything to the extreme, see what it does. How you may go, I would never crop that in to just, this. But you might do it and be wildly surprised that it actually works, or it changes the story, or it alters where your eye goes. And so that's why every year I'm like, try weird things. Like, don't be afraid to try weird things because I think you'll really surprise yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I always try like random like circle crops and like, I go and play around, and then I usually never use them. But it's like, you go and have that play and see what it looks like and go from there.
Yeah. So this is also a different image. What led you here, and then what led you away and back to the other image?
Yeah, so this one was between this one and the one I submitted of what to put in, because I love this image. The reason why, like, you obviously, the storytelling is different in the one I submitted because that drop of blood and kind of the stretching and crowning, that kind of the whole ring of fire story. I do really love that. You don't have that here. There is parts that I love is like the mucus that you can see kind of like in the mirror, but then also see it kind of like coming out the top of the image because it's
That's
like you're
mind
seeing that
bending.
reflection. Yeah, you just look at it and you're like, what is going on? Like,
Oh, I just clicked. I see it. It's a puddle on the
there's a
gloves.
puddle of mucus from Bub's nose, but the way it kind of like, and I feel like with like some good, like a good caption, you could really like, because I do think captions for me, I find like they can be like the make or break of sometimes kind of like certain points and stuff that could put you into certain categories. So I really do, captions are something I like really think about and really want to like use to tell my story. Um, the reason why ultimately I didn't submit this one is the focus is on the top of Bub's head, and it just, then there was like a bit of motion blur with everything happening as fast as it was happening. And so kind of like from like brows down on Bub, it's not super sharp. And that was, I was like, someone will pull that apart.
Yeah, because the focus is the mucus on Bub's nose.
Yes, yeah. And so it's just with that because of like, yeah, distancing. And yeah, I think it just, like, I love it. But in the end, I was like, it's not that level for it to be an award image.
Yeah.
And as much as I wanted to be like, I don't care, everyone see it. Like, it was that kind of thing of like, no, we've got to go with the one that kind of like technically as well has like those elements and yeah, has that different story.
And that's the this is so difficult because that's the level of detachment that I talk about, the emotional attachment that we get to, because we're like, but no, this one, because
Yeah.
this is an absolutely incredible image. And so what I'm really curious about is, because I see this and I go, ooh, what's it look like as a storyboard? Did
I
you?
did try that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
where, at what stage were you like, nah, I need to pick one?
Well, so the midwife that she has this image,
Because
like
that's
an
the
early
final.
crowning image, and the one that was submitted, the three on her wall. And so I had kind of like played around with them together there. When I put them together to try and like see if it would work to submit as a three, um, because of like the movements, they just didn't flow nicely. It kind of felt a bit jarring that you couldn't get them to match up and you couldn't get it to kind of like look good together as the three.
So like the mirror
For
was in
an
different
award.
places. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like sometimes the mirror is like, like part of it's chopped off, like on the side, or, like where she is positioned in the mirror is differently. Um, and so I couldn't get it to kind of like look good. Like, it looks good together, like, but for an award, I just felt like it wasn't strong. It kind of like brought the image down as a whole. But it definitely was something that I did try and play around with, but in the end was like, no, it's just got to be like the one standalone image. And yeah.
Yeah. And look, I mean, that's something that we talk about all the time. I tell the entrants as well as I tell the judges when we're kind of looking at storyboards, is a storyboard is only as strong as its weakest image. So as soon as you start throwing in weaker images than the strongest one is when we kind of start to have problems. So yeah, that probably would have been that probably would have been pegged for having, different ratios of images and stuff. That is kind of when you might see something and then have to consciously in camera go, oh, I want to submit this as a series. So that might require a bit of forethought to be able to compose that consistently, which
Yeah.
sometimes you're so in the moment and you're so excited that it's happening that you're like, I just need to get it.
Yeah. And even times where I've tried to plan that, like there was a hospital birth where I was like, I'm going to do a storyboard with this. It's going to be amazing. It was like the empty hospital room. And then and then when I got out and like looked at them all on computer, it's like just enough slight differences of angles and stuff. And I'm like, oh, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
I've tried it a couple of times and you've got like 5 hours in between taking that first image, and then you like look at it and you're like, oh, I nailed it. It was like the exact same shot, and it's not.
Yeah. Well, I actually tried to do something very similar. I don't have the image on me, but I had a concept where I photographed a loss, and then mom got pregnant with her rainbow baby, and I photographed her rainbow baby. And I wanted to show that birth is birth, and went back through her loss and her positions that she birthed in, and went into her rainbow baby and chose 3 or 4 images that I wanted to recreate pending she was in the same positions she was. And so I, got a picture of her on all fours with both, and a picture of like certain ones with all of them, and then juxtapositioned them together. The loss was in black and white. The rainbow baby was in color, but the concept was there. It didn't do well. I thought it was like the most creative thing and the next best thing. And I think that my caption let the image down. I don't think that it was very clear what was going on. The idea and the concept was a good idea, but my execution in telling that story, I think, let the overall story down. And people were like, is this the same mom? I can't tell. I don't understand. One judge picked up the story and was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And it got challenged, but people were like, oh yeah, I see what you're talking about now, but it was so poorly executed. It's cool that you're in gold. The concept is gold, but the execution is not. I am not coming up. And they did not come up.
Yeah, it's that like the whole overall, like being able to tell it. And yeah, so many times I've submitted images and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, and yeah, like certain things are just like missed in it. And you're like, I thought it was obvious, but yeah.
And that's the emotional attachment I think that we can sometimes have. And, I was so angry over, not angry, but frustrated of like, what do you mean you don't see it? Like, how can you not tell it's the same person? How can you not tell that this is a loss? Like, I made it black and white to show that it's a loss. This is color to show that it's, it's there. And, I put it down to like, you're just a bunch of middle-aged white guys and you just don't know what you're talking about because this is a documentary and not, that whole thing. And then many, many years later, when I created Birth Photographer of the Year and I started going through my award images, it's so funny. I actually pull that image up and use it as an example for the judges during the judges training of like, hey, this is a poorly executed example. Like, I agree with the judges now. Going back in hindsight and looking at it, I'm like, oh, I see what they're talking about now. Like, that makes sense. And so I actually would love to go back and rework it and see if I can't get it better. I don't know. But yeah.
It's an awesome concept. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, what is, I'd love to know just as far as feedback, how has that affected anything about your work or bringing that into your client work or future award work? Like, how has that changed, if it's changed anything for you?
Yeah, I think especially early on, the first year I submitted, and I submitted an image from like the second birth that I did, and I was like, this is amazing, and it kind of got ripped apart.
Oh no, I don't want people to feel like it's ripped apart.
And
Uh-oh.
no, but in that. Oh, did I just drop out then?
It's okay. I can cut it. I can cut it out. I was just saying, oh my goodness, I don't want people to feel like their image is getting ripped apart. But this is good. Tell me, so that way I can refine judges' trainings.
No, it was more like, and technically, it wasn't, like a great image. And it was that I had that emotional attachment to it. It was the second birth I'd ever photographed, and I was like, look at me, I'm amazing. And like also I'm like my like self-taught with like a lot of mentoring from my dad, who's a photographer. So it kind of like very much like I threw myself into burst being like, I don't know what I'm doing. We'll see. And, have kind of perfected that over the years. But with those like early on ones, those feedback, especially where it was like, you've got to really like make sure that if you're submitting them, like these are the points that you've got to really focus on. And, I think there was an early one on that. I don't know if I actually ended up submitting that, but it was in one of your, I'm blanking on what it was called, where we could kind of go for feedback before the
Like a
awards.
critique.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
word. And yeah, I think it was kind of like working on kind of like the highlights and, not kind of, really working on the more technical side. Whereas I'm very much like a emotional photographer of like, if I feel emotional towards the image, it's amazing. So from those early years, I definitely like took that feedback and really like focused on it. And I do find when I go into burst, like I'm very much there just capturing the burst. And sometimes I am in a moment and I'm like, oh, this could be like, this could be an image that I could get from this, that could be an award image. And then I really like go like not, I don't want to like be like, I don't like, make sure I'm taking good technical images all the time. But I'll kind of be like extra careful on like positioning and like kind of what I have, like, focusing on the angles a little bit more instead of just kind of like the more documentary of like, yeah. So I just kind of look at it more in an award setting. And I remember you saying to me very early days, Lacey, you said like taking 3 images kind of, but one really close, one a little bit further back and one right back. And then that way you've got those options. If one of them doesn't work, you've got the kind of other spots that you can kind of play around and work with. And that's something, especially when I'm really liking something and I'm like, I feel like this could be great. I really do bring that forward again. And I'm like, all right, let's make sure we've got multiple shots of this so that I do have a little bit more to play around with rather than just the one and then going, oh, okay, it didn't work. Then that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think feedback over the years, and the feedback has gotten just like progressively better and better, which is lovely. And
We're all
yeah,
learning
I
too.
do. Yeah. But I think more in just like as I submit them and I'm more conscious with what I'm submitting and going from there. I remember I think it was the second year I entered and there was an image that I was tossing between one image and another one, and my mom was helping me pick them. And there was one that she was like, this is the best image ever. You need to submit this. And I was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure if it's like at that level, but she's like, no, you've got to. And so I put that one in and it, like the technical parts of it that weren't great were kind of like really picked up on. And then now I've got that as a standing point to always be like, you just got to I have to pick them. You don't get to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've really benefited from the feedback that I have gotten, which I think it's been 4 years, I think, of submitting the images. And yeah, just the feedback has really helped me. And then also I find it even just in like award images, like just when I'm shooting, I'm able to kind of like pick up on those things and be like, yeah, that would be really distracting in a photo. Like, let's slightly change my angle and like, get that better shot there.
Yeah. I think even, first of all, I think every single birth photographer has like every I'm a firm believer that every professional birth photographer has an award-winning image in their gallery. They just have to find it. And it might need a little bit of refinement and cropping or fixing, but it's there. And it's always so much fun to watch. Like if you go back to the 2020 galleries, whenever we first started to see the entries and then go to 2023 galleries to the images that are submitted, like I just find that it fosters so much creativity and gives so much permission for like, we're creatives. This is what we want to do. However, I feel like we can be bound to this idea or this ideology of documentary. It is what it is. And
Mm.
yes, that is true, but we still have so much freedom and creativity in how we choose to position ourselves in relation to what is happening in front of us. And that can make
Yes.
such a huge difference in the quality, and the not just the quality of work that we're producing, but the story that is being told. And so I think having a birth photography image competition specifically in this context where we can freely chat about images in a way that would continue to foster that creativity. It's always meant to leave entrants encouraged to go back to Lightroom or Photoshop or wherever you're working in, and then just try something new. And if it works,
Yeah.
great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. Take what you need and leave what you don't. Because there are some times where I've gotten feedback and I'm like, nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope. And one of those pieces of feedback for me was when I first started entering birth photography into like mainstream awards, into the documentary category. Again, all the middle-aged white men were like, you need to put this in black and white. This would be so much better in black and white. You should pop this in black
Yeah.
and white. And I was like, I will not. Never, no. And I didn't. And I like every single year I was like, oh, okay. If they think it needs to be in black and white, maybe my color grades aren't that good. So then
Mm.
I went back and I started to learn color theory and split toning and how can I accentuate things with color. And I finally made it to a point where the color was so good that they couldn't tell me to put it in black and white. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't
Yeah.
crap anymore.
Yeah.
And then from then on, it was like color was a thing in birth photography. And it was so cool to kind of watch that unfold because I was like, I will not cave. And that is
Yeah.
something that I want you guys as entrants to take away too, is you might have a concept in your head of that you want to portray. And if it doesn't do well, it doesn't mean that it's bad or to shy away and not do it again. It just means that we just might not see it yet. And it might need some finesse and some refinement.
Hmm.
Keep doing it, keep submitting it, keep trying. Eventually we'll see what you see and it'll, trendsetters.
Yeah.
And that's what I think birth photographer of the year is really all about, is that
Yeah.
that freedom and that creativity. So thank you so much
100%. No, thank you.
for sitting and chatting with me. Was there anything else that you wanted to share? How can we find you?
You can find me. I'm mostly on Instagram, which is natural focus _ birth photography. Currently, I really just post photos from my own birth, which gorgeous Sarah from Life and Lens Photography. So I am very conscious of like just sharing like on my birth page, like other photographers' stuff. But yeah, you can find me there. I'll be, hopefully sharing some stuff that gets submitted into this year's competition.
I can't wait.
I know. I've got a couple that I'm like looking at. Obviously, it's a bit harder now that with a baby, I don't have as much time to sit down and just really go through them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. And I think as well last year I didn't photograph as many births. So there's not as many to kind of like pull from, which is totally fine. But yeah, it's that kind of thing where it's like, I think the year before I like did the most births I'd ever done. And so I just had all these images. I'm like, how do I pick?
Yes. That's always such a nice problem to have when you're trying to narrow it down.
Yes, definitely. But it does make it hard as well. I think actually having less bursts to pick from is nice because it's like, okay, like these are the like star images
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not trying to like cull them down, which is also like, like every image, I'm like, it's my baby. you
Yes.
you
Yes.
can't take it out. But yeah, so really looking forward to it. But yeah, and I think just I have gone from, yeah, like as you were saying, like I watch like the live streams, obviously not when I'm asleep, but I go through, and when the awards are kind of streaming, it's like up on the TV, and I just like spend that time just to really go through. And I think that I have found so helpful in also like learning from what critiques are happening from other people's photos, like seeing people's photos and going, that's amazing. Like, I want to kind of like use that as an influence for like something going into a birth. And I think when you really immerse yourself in other people's photos, you can kind of like, you just pick up from their creativity as well,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like can bring that into your next birth. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend sitting down and just like actually taking the time to look at all the submissions. And it was great. I was very sick and pregnant last year, so I was just on the couch in a blanket watching it, and it was great.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, there's such a wealth of knowledge, not just like, even if you don't want to submit your own images, that's totally
Mm,
fine. Just go watch the live stream. Like, it's
yeah,
crazy some of the stuff that you'll kind of learn and then be able to pull into your own work. So,
yeah.
yeah, thanks so much, Beth. It was so great chatting
No,
with you. Please
thank
go
you.
and follow Beth, and I'll see you in entries.
Can't wait.
Thank you.